Well, Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the global food crisis aggravated by the war will be the focus of world leaders as they converge in the United Nations in New York for the 77th session of the United Nations General Assembly. President Mohammadu Buhari, amongst other global economic and political leaders in attendance at the UNGA meeting, will be deliberating on addressing most pressing global challenges. The theme this year is a watershed moment, transformative solutions to interlocking challenges, and will reflect the many connected issues we face today, including the war in Ukraine, energy crisis, cost of living, COVID-19 pandemic, humanitarian disasters caused by climate. Of course, also in the United Kingdom, where the Vice President is representing President Buhari, where Queen Elizabeth is also being buried. We'll look at all of this and, of course, business relations between Nigeria, the UK, Nigeria, the US. And joining me to do this, I have the right person. He is the partner and chief economist at PricewaterhouseCoopers. It's Dr. Andrew Nevin. Dr. Nevin is joining me from Canada. Thank you so much. It's good to see you.
Tolo, my brother, it's always great to be with you on your program and to see you anywhere.
Yeah, thank you so much. First, let's start with Nigeria and United Kingdom business relations. I've been trying to read through. I see that it's a very, very vibrant one, looking good. But do you think we can strengthen ties? And if we can, what areas should we look at?
Well, I think there's such a good relationship right now between the United Kingdom and Nigeria. We need that in the world. And of course, the United Kingdom was able to project such soft power around a number of its cultural things that it does, and of course the Queen and her terrible passing, but the strength of the monarchy, but particularly football, which is really critical to Nigerians. On the other hand, the United Kingdom is not a big country, so not all of our commercial relationships are going to be connected to the United Kingdom. But I do think one area that we should be strengthening is education. Obviously, with the ASU strike, it shows some of the frailties we have in our education system. The United Kingdom has a very strong education system, but I don't need more students leaving Nigeria to go to the United Kingdom to learn, which is not a bad thing, but it's not something we can do at scale. What I mean is there should be, if the United Kingdom wanted to have a bigger impact on Nigeria, it should be in Nigeria, helping to set up the educational system that will deliver for the millions of young people who need to be educated.
A great way to start, but I'm also worried about the global challenges that we face. Now, looking at investment drive, there was a reduction when we saw the capital importation figures sometime last week, showing a drop in investments from UK and the United States. Do you still think that Nigeria is that hub that everyone wants to come to?
Well, I think over the time that I've been here, as you know, more than a decade, I guess getting close to 15 years, we haven't done enough to create the business conditions to attract investment. And we still have a harsh environment for business. People want to invest in it, including Nigerians, including the diaspora. Of course, there's a lot more talk about the diaspora, including other groups as well. But the reason the investment is dropping is that despite all the efforts, particularly, say, by Dr. Jamoke over at PEBEC, really, people have tried very hard, but there's just been too many barriers to it. But when we think of the big pools of investment, I don't think it's necessarily going to come from the UK. I really look to the EU, actually, to be a bigger source of investment. People may recall on July 1st, the EU announced, for example, 1.3 billion euros to help with agricultural value chains. I think the EU companies like Arla, Heineken are really connected to the local economy. The EU, as a government state-to-state actor with the Nigerian government, are really committed to improving agricultural value chains, as evidenced by this 1.3 billion euros. So I think that's a strong source of investment. I think the United States, they have more capital and more willingness to take risk than the United Kingdom. We're still a risk environment. So that's a second big source of capital. The other country that I would put out there that we should be talking to more on a commercial basis is India. We put out our paper a couple of months ago now about the India-Nigeria relationship. India's faced many of the same challenges that we face and have found homegrown solutions for it. So I think those are the three big sources of capital for us. And we really should be forging deeper commercial ties with all of those, with the EU, India, and the United States. Of course, it doesn't mean we aren't going to be deepening our ties with the United Kingdom, but it doesn't necessarily have the capital. And of course, right now it faces its own real economic challenges, the United Kingdom. So I think in the medium term, we can't really look to them for large sources of investment.
Ease of doing business is key if we want to bring in all of these guys. We know what PEBEC has been doing, and I know we've talked about this before now, Dr. Nevin, but what more? I saw the minister, or in quote, Minister of Trade and Investment, saying that we will give policies, we will open up, implement policies that will make foreign countries, of course, like the United Kingdom and the United States, do more with us. I'm now being specific. What real policies do we need to put in place? Why I'm saying this is, for example, look at what happened with the privatization of the power sector and what's been happening with that. Many investors not wanting to show interest, talking about cost-reflective tariff and some other issues like that. So what more can we do to entice all of this, guys, so that we can bring in this foreign exchange that we really, really need as a country?
Well, I mean, we've had 8 years of His Excellency President Buhari's administration, and we've been talking about ease of doing business improvements for those 8 years. And it seems a little late in this administration to say we're going to attract foreign investment because it hasn't happened. I mean, the basic reasons it hasn't happened, I think everyone who's part of the show today understands. I mean, we have a number of distortions, including the FX distortion. We went to the central bank 6 years ago at a private meeting. We said it will be mathematically impossible to grow this economy at greater than 2 or 3% without changing the FX regime because people will refuse to invest. And that, in fact, has come true. So many investors start with that and say, if we don't understand how to repatriate our profits, then we're not willing to invest. And then, that's come to pass. As you say, one of the other big distortions is the electricity distortion. You would think that providing power would be something that people want to invest in. And there has been a lot of investment in power, but it has tended to be in smaller scale, in generators and in solar, people investing to produce their own power. But at a grid level, it hasn't been attractive. You can't recoup your investment on it. So that's a second big distortion. And then, of course, we have the foil subsidy, which we've all spent much time talking on. It can't last much longer given the scale it's at. But at a more structural level, I mean, we had the Orange report in 2013. It took until 2020, I believe, for His Excellency to assent to it. It's now taken to 2022 for some discussion of implementation. It is far too complex at the federal government of Nigeria level. Too many MDAs, over 1,000, too much overlapping jurisdiction, confusion for the business community and who they need to deal with. And unless we have that simplification and, of course, more decision-making at the state level, which has been a positive thing over the last 4 or 5 years, in business environment is going to continue to struggle to attract investment. So all of the things that we knew and talked about a lot 5, 6, 7 years ago have continued under the regime, that both terms of the President Buhari's regime. And unfortunately, we've run out of time. We're running out of time. We need to rapidly really address this the next administration.
Indeed, because I'm also saying that if there's this seamless relationship, we'll be getting more of diaspora remittances that, of course, will help us shore up our external reserves one way or the other and help stabilize our naira. What are we doing also along that angle? We know the central bank has done a lot to attract those abroad to bring in their FX through the right channel. That's the official channel. But obviously, many will still want to use the other market. So what more can we do along this angle of Forex to improve inflows from diaspora?
Well, as I said, we were very clear 6 years ago. We had a private meeting with the CBN and made the point that we needed a single exchange rate. I mean, when you have multiple exchange rates, I mean, what happens, of course, is that doing business becomes not your preferred avenue for making money. The preferred avenue is actually round tripping. So that to the extent that the FX gap is widened between the sorry for the noise in the background, between the parallel rate and the official rate, that incentive becomes stronger and stronger. And of course, it's just a fiction to say we have a 4.30 rate or a 4.11 rate. You can't access dollars at that. So it becomes a starting point for unified exchange rate. And we were moving to the unified exchange rate. The central bank, in fact, the Central Bank of Nigeria and the governor has been very clear we want a market-determined exchange rate. We were moving in that direction. And then it got reversed, of course, as some external events happen, which is really unfortunate on that. But that's the starting point. And of course, in the diaspora, I mean, why would the diaspora send their dollars at 430 to the naira? Sorry, naira to the dollar instead of at 700. I mean, so we know that that's the way they want to send their money. The other issue, of course, is we want the diaspora to invest, not simply send money to their relatives and friends for education, for healthcare. Those things are important, but we want them to invest in larger projects in Nigeria. And I think their conditions are very clear. They want to have a transparent structure of how that's governed. They want it to be private sector led. They want it in many cases to be focused on their own state. So it's not necessarily, I mean, NIDCOM, which is a fantastic organization, enormous respect for the chairwoman of NIDCOM, who's doing an incredible job on that. But we also need and we're seeing the diaspora commissions at the state level step up and figure out the conditions to attract diaspora investment directly to the state. So I was the other day with the Honorable Commissioner for Diaspora Affairs from Ondo. They're an example who I think are doing a very good job on that path. But the diaspora is going to demand transparency. They're going to demand it comes in at a unified exchange rate. They're going to demand a system that they can repatriate the profits or dividends from the investments they make. And they're going to demand that it's private sector led. So in a way, I think the diaspora is actually going to play a critical political role in Nigeria, despite the fact they don't have a vote, because they're so powerful now economically, and because everyone recognizes, including, as I said, in all the states, how critical they are for the state development in a positive way.
Now, let's move to the United States now, where President Buhari is there for the annual UNGA Meeting, that's 77, that's the United Nations General Assembly. Now, for you, what do you think will take center stage, or what do you think those world leaders, what do you think will worry them more at this time? Global issues there, energy crisis there, climate action there, COVID-19 saga still on the front burner. And of course, a lot of issues. You've identified education and all of the sectors that we can strengthen ties. But what do you think will top this discussion as we move on?
Well, it's hard to know what's going to happen at UNGA this year. And it's wonderful that President Buhari has gone to UNGA. Some other leaders chose to go to Her Majesty the Queen's funeral, which I understand. But, it's such a critical time in the world. Perhaps they could have done what Nigeria does, is have the president go to UNGA and a representative go to the Queen's funeral. But be that as it may, we're at a really critical time. I mean, why is the United Nations set up the aftermath of the Second World War to create harmonious relationships between countries? Because we had such a devastating, I think 100 million people lost their lives in the Second World War. It affected everyone on this planet on that. So the decision was, we don't want to have that happen again. Unfortunately, we're going backwards. I mean, we all see the Russian invasion of the Ukraine. We all see the increasing tensions between China and the United States, and not just in commercial terms, but also in military terms with what's going on in Taiwan. So it's a very dangerous time. And of course, the Security Council, which many people feel is the most important organization in the United Nations, has 15 members, 5 of which are permanent. So the permanent members are the United States, France, the United Kingdom, Russia, and China. And now you have those all groups at loggerheads. So it's a very difficult time for UNGA. And I think we have all these substantive issues that we need to address, and particularly climate change is something that no nation can do on its own. So the need for the climate emergency to be addressed by international cooperation is just so enormous on that. And yet we've reached a point where international cooperation is not possible. So I don't want to say I'm pessimistic. Everyone knows I'm optimistic, certainly about the future of Nigeria. But I think the first thing that UNGA needs to think about, or the UN needs to think about, is, given what's happened with China and given what's happened with Russia in the last few years, what is the structure of the UN? Are there some changes at the UN? Because right now, of course, the Security Council is dysfunctional because of Russia's ability to veto everything. The fact that Russia did this invasion, there's increasing evidence of war crimes, puts us in a very difficult place. And I think the knock-on effect of that is we're going to find that in the climate emergency, we're not getting the level of cooperation between countries, which is really unfortunate. And of course, we also have, particularly for Africa and Nigeria, the issue of climate reparations, of climate justice. I mean, we did not cause the climate change. We did not contribute really to the greenhouse gas emissions in the world, minuscule amount of it. And yet Africa is going to really bear the brunt of it in terms of climate changes, in terms of increased flooding, in terms of the Sahara Desert moving south, deforestation. All of those issues are really affecting us already today. The potential for flooding of Lagos and having people having to move further north. So, and of course, His Excellency the Vice President's come out and talked about climate justice, climate reparations. That needs to be on the agenda. But right now, with the big economies and the big countries not able to cooperate, it's hard to see how to advance that agenda.
Finally, a lot of topics. You've identified a lot of, of course, the focus and what we expect might happen at that gathering. But I'm interested in two. Let's wrap up on that note. First is how to address illicit financial flow. It's very important that we try to address this as a country. And the other aspect of it, and I know you'll be interested in that, is taking advantage of Nigeria's creative industry. What's your take?
Well, I think on the illicit financial flows, of course, there's different sorts of illicit financial flows. There's one category which is just simply people evading taxes and moving profits between jurisdictions. And I actually think in that area, the world is making a lot of progress on that. I mean, we have all the FATCA started it, but we now have this exchange of information. Certainly my bank in Canada asked me where I pay on my taxes, show evidence of it, and I have to show that evidence of it. So I think we're making progress on it. So a large multinational is finding it increasingly difficult to move their profits to a lower tax jurisdiction. So that's progress. I think the part that's, of course, harder is when people actually are involved in criminal activity and hiding their the proceeds. And of course, we have cryptocurrencies to do that. I think that's going to take a lot more thought in how we regulate that. But the diversion of tax revenue by big companies, I think, is coming under control in the world, which is a good thing. And of course, the major economies, and I think including Nigeria, agreed to a minimum tax on corporations that would be applied globally on that. On Nollywood, music industry, I mean, everyone knows, I'm a big fan of Nigerian exporting high value added services. We just put our big paper out about that. And of course, among the highest value added services are the incredible talent exports that we have in Nollywood and Burna Boy, Tiwa Savage, Davido, and Fireboy I think is the new one that my wife tells me about. So that's really exciting. And I read somewhere, I think the official Nigerian Bureau of Statistics, that the oil industry is less than 6%, and the Nollywood and music industries are about 3%. So in fact, we think of ourselves as an oil economy. We keep saying at PwC it's not an oil economy. I mean, I think in my time in Nigeria, I'm going to see Nollywood and the creative industries surpass oil as a share of GDP, which is just fantastic. And of course, AFDB just set up with the Vice Presidency this new fund. It's a $500 million fund, both for ICT, but also the creative industries. About a third of that money is going to be invested in the creative industries and around the country. So I think we're going to see not just Nollywood in Lagos, but in Benin City, is it Collywood and Kano? They make a lot of films now. So I think that the potential is all there, and I think we should be all in on the creative industries. Huge value added, very exciting. Improves Nigeria's image around the world, brings pleasure to people around the world watching Nigerian movies and listening to Nigerian music. So it's a very positive. And of course, it's self-organizing. I mean, it's done it without a lot of support from the government just because of the creativity of the people involved. So a little bit more organization, the government and some funding, it's just going to accelerate it. So I think a very bright future for Nollywood and for the Nigerian music industry.
I must thank you. I told you, I knew you were going to be interested in talking about that, and I got you right there. Thank you so much. Dr. Andrew Nevin is a partner, chief economist, PricewaterhouseCoopers. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time.